So these requests here don't seem to work correctly. Specifically here for the password, I get some email-specific error message if I'm entering an incorrect password. Now, as I explained in the last lecture, in theory, this validation code here in this post route should output a password-specific error message if I have password data in the request body and the password is too short, but clearly that doesn't work. And the only reason why that might not work is that maybe here, when we entered a password value, this email value is part of that post request. Because if that would be the case, this if check here would become active, because I'm checking if I got an email field in the request body, and I then validate that email address, and I don't even run my other checks here if that's the case. So it seems like we don't even get to this check, and that can only happen if there is some email data in the request body. So that seems to be the problem here. Now, of course, the post request for that password is sent whenever that password input changes. So why is there email data attached to that request? Well, because when HTMX sends a post request, it tries to attach any meaningful data it can get. And if that post request is sent because some input changes, and that input is in a form, it turns out that HTMX gathers all the form data of the entire form. And that's of course not what I want here. I want to attach just the data of this input, not the entire form data. So what can we do about that? Now, you might recall the hxVals attribute from earlier in the course, which could be used to add new data to an outgoing request. Now I essentially want to filter the data that's added automatically, so that not all the values are added. And this can be achieved with help of another HTMX attribute, the hx-params attribute. This attribute allows you to filter the parameters, the values, that will be attached to the outgoing request. To be precise, here with hx-params, you can specify a comma-separated list of the values that should be added to the request. And any other values which you don't specify here will be dropped and will not be part of the request. So here on that password input, I for example want to make sure that I only send along the password value. So the value that's stored under a name password in the outgoing request. And that's achieved by simply adding that value name, password in this case, to hx-params. Now, if I would also want to include the email, I could add it, comma separated like this, though that of course is absolutely not what I want here. So instead it's just hx-params password. And we can achieve the opposite effect here on the email input by setting hx-params to email. That makes sure that here it's really only the email value that's part of the outgoing request. Well, and with that done, if you go back to the application and reload after saving all your files, if I enter an invalid email, that's still validated. But if I then enter an invalid password and then tab out of this field, now you see I'm getting that password error message. And that's therefore how you can control which data is attached to the outgoing request.